عندنا مسارات في قاعة A المسار التحول الرقمي، في القاعة C المسار الاستثمار والابتكار، في المسار B منتدى التكنولوجيا الإعلان والإعلام. راح يكون معنا إن شاء الله الحين ورشة دردشة مع شبكة ديسكفري، راح يقوم بالنقاش الأستاذة رشا غملوش مديرة برامج ArabNet.
Good evening. Are the microphone? Okay, this is good. So this session will be in English because Amanda doesn't speak Arabic, although we'll work on that eventually. Thank you for all being here after lunch. I know it's not always fun to work after lunch, but I promise this is going to be amazing and entertaining, just like a lot of Discovery's content and the great things that they do. And Amanda's always a pleasure to talk to. Allow me to introduce Amanda. Amanda Turnbull is the Vice President and Country Manager of Middle East and North Africa for Discovery Networks. She's been for Discovery for over 10 years, 15 years. And she's really focused on the future of the channel and moving things forward. So I think we'll kick straight into the conversation. Today, when we talk about Discovery Network, most of what you guys know is a TV channel, or, well, a lot of TV channels, not just one. Today, as someone who's been in the TV business for a long time, and that's what the world thinks it is. It says it's TV business, not content business. Do you think TV is dead? And at least if you say for the younger generations.
So, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, although not thank you for giving me the after-lunch slot and for having me compete with Hyperloop in the room next door, which is kind of annoying actually because I'd like to be watching them. But thank you all very much for being here. Great first question, is television dead? Thank you for that. So of course we would say no. Of course I would say that. I think it's certainly being very, very heavily disrupted, and it's really about your attitude to life these days in this space. We feel we've moved from being a television company in pay to being a content provider. And it's not so much a question now of talking about what screen and whether it's linear or VOD or catch-up or whatever. It's just about fabulous content. But certainly, we need to be realistic. The business is being hugely disrupted. And I guess it depends, on your attitude to life. Are you glass half empty or glass half full? Do you see that this is a huge opportunity for a company like ours to do more? Or are you panicking and running around? So, we think it's all about disruption. We know that, smart people will be watching on smartphones. They already are. But the numbers are quite interesting. I mean, obviously, 2.5 billion smartphones around the world, but in MENA, 170 million today, 288 million by 2022. I mean, I'm sure you know these numbers better than I do. But, huge opportunity, I think. But it's not about the screen. It's about what people are watching. And for a company like Discovery, where we invest, $2.5–3 billion annually on creating content in our particular space, the key thing is to create the content, to tell the stories, to own the IP, and then to work out how you are going to distribute that in ways that people now want to watch it and will discover it.
So I guess today the content as Ghamlouch has been really established itself. Today when we go to lots of publishers or people that produce content, they say, content is king at the end of the day. It's not about the medium. That is true, but adapting to the medium, as you were saying, is very important. Today, more than ever, we've proven that it's the quality of that content that's what really matters, and the dedication to it. If we talk about, well, definitely TV is just a medium today, and you guys are more into the content business. But as a comparison for the audience to kind of understand, do you see on-demand content growing as a larger percentage of your viewership?
Of the mix, yeah.
Yeah, and what other parts of the mix maybe are out there?
I mean, that answer really depends on where you are in the world. So, you know, in the States, for example, we have a product, Discovery Go, which has 155 million people subscribe to it. And what we find particularly interesting about that is that 50% of those people watching it are aged 18 to 34. So I think it really depends on the maturity of the market and where you are. In this region, what's interesting is that there are, I think, about 17 different subscription VOD services. So obviously you've got OSN Wavo, you've got the local version of Netflix, you've got Shahid and so on. And at the moment, the data is slightly difficult to come by, but what we think is that there are about 1.5 million paying subscribers for those products at the moment. And Dataxis is suggesting that by, I think, 2022, that will be 10.7 million. So I think to answer your question, there is room for growth. At the moment in this region, the majority of our viewers are on linear, but that's just because we haven't yet, with the exception of Fatifit, which is our Arabic language food network, where we're very developed digitally, but we have, you know, one of the things that is important for us in this region is the relationship that we have with our two existing pay TV platform partners, and how we move forward in the AVOD, SVOD space is in some way linked to the relationship that we have with them. But what I do see is a huge opportunity, and I think most people in our business would agree with this, that what's exciting is the propensity to pay. I think that, you know, you have different models in the business. You have high ARPU models, and then you have people coming in like iFlix coming in with a much lower price for the consumers. And I think that's probably the way to drive the uptake of this sort of viewing. The price has to be a complete no-brainer almost. It has to be just one level above piracy for us to really get into more of the households than we're getting to at the moment with traditional pay. And I guess one of the things that we're competing with is, you know, free-to-air television in this region is very dominant. There are nearly 1,000 channels. So people are very used to not having to pay.
So I guess, but also that's been because not very long ago, most of the channels in the Middle East were government funded. There were not money networks up until NBC really, and very few private TVs. I think I want to look at the audience and see how many of you watch TV every evening. Can you raise your hands up?
I'm one of you.
Okay. How many of you don't have a TV at home? Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. How many of you watch content on or have a pay like video on demand subscription like Netflix or Shahid or? All right, that's okay. That's good. That looks quite.
But that's what you would expect to see.
So, with that today, one of the biggest struggles that a lot of the publishers have is payment. And you were saying, you know, a lot of the people in this region are not used to paying for this. Well, we just saw quite a bigger raise of hands for the people that pay for VOD. Do you feel like people? What kind of content are people paying for today? And you know, how do you work with that on a local level in comparison to international?
So I think what you see is in this region and globally there is an increasing propensity to pay, depending on what market you are, what level of maturity, you know, the level that you can charge obviously varies. So, you know, traditionally an amount, the equivalent of somewhere between $8 and $12 per month is considered to be, you know, average that you charge. But again, you know, someone like iFlix is going to come in and charge around $2 or $3, so that's going to be very interesting. But generally speaking, there is a growing propensity to pay, and depending on what demographic you're targeting, then obviously the pricing is going to vary. What we find around the world is that obviously there are some content genres which drive payment more than others, so it won't come as any surprise that sport is one of the key things that drives people to pay, live sport particularly. That's quite difficult in this region because it's very dominated by one player. But for example, Discovery in Europe a couple of years ago bought into a network called Eurosport. And one of the reasons we did that was to get into sport, but also to get into a digital product. So Eurosport is across 54 markets in Europe. It is 750 million subscribers to a digital-only platform. And for example, we just launched in Germany on Eurosport the Bundesliga, purely on Eurosport only, not on television at all, which was interesting. So Eurosport gives us an opportunity to experiment and to understand what people will pay for, to what level, and so on. And what we're beginning to learn is that transactional payment, payment by season pass, by sport, or even just purely by event is important. The flexibility is really critical. So then you have to have the systems and the processes that can cope with that level of flexibility for your consumers. So it's not about, the old way of doing it, which is selling a subscription and it's an annual subscription and it's a high fee and it's one fee and, it's irrespective of how much you use it and how much you watch. So I think that is what is changing, that this has to get more as the data improves and the back end improves so that people can actually link what they're watching with what they're paying for, and then we can see the data for that as well. That's important.
And so I think that goes back to an interesting conversation we had just off stage, which is today people don't mind paying. We've seen that. But people are also bombarded with options. Today there's a lot of VOD channels. Yeah. There's tons of options between linear TV, video on demand, YouTube, social channels, etc. And do you feel like you're competing a lot for viewers' time, and because really that's where people would spend on content is their time. They're investing their time in you. How do you deal with that? How do you try to engage these people through these platforms and kind of counter all these options maybe?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point, because we are competing for people's time. And I think in that, it's for us anyway, in our space, it's about the storytelling. So we feel very strongly that if you have a great story and you tell it well and you have great production values and you have a brand name behind it, then we have more of a chance. But this is where I think it's very important to make the distinction between what Discovery does in its space. I mean, because really, if you think about it, we're serving audiences of superfans. So when you look at Discovery Channel, it's made up of turbo, science, engineering, adventure, survival, these deep verticals. And these are what people want to see. So, a show like Gold Rush or Deadliest Catch or Mythbusters or Bear Grylls, these are expensive shows to make. So our model is that we make the content, it runs in 224 countries, and we localize it with languaging and scheduling and so on. But essentially, it's the same piece of content that runs everywhere. And this is how you build global franchises and global hits. So, Gold Rush, for example, which is currently one of our biggest franchises, is watched by 160 million people around the world. So we feel that if you can tell great stories, you have an opportunity to have people discover your content because there's a brand behind it. But I would say that, and again, this focus is important for us as a company because, fine, Netflix spends $8 billion a year now making content, but don't forget they're making content across a whole range of genres. And, some of the content they make is fabulous and it's a huge hit, but their miss rate is quite significant too. So we feel that we have a USP, I guess. We're very focused in these key verticals where we know that we can serve super fans and they will find our content irrespective of the platform.
So I guess one of the things we wanted to talk about as well is investment. Today you guys are investing in the future. You're looking at yourself as a content producer, not a TV, not a channel on TV. What kinds of activities, or how do you see yourself investing in the future? Are you investing in your own shows, or what is your strategy more broadly? I know you guys also acquired Fatafit regionally. So are you what are your models for investments and expansion?
Yeah, so I mean, I have to be very honest and say that in a lot of the cases we are acquiring the talent, the know-how, the digital natives, as it were, to speed up our disruption process. And I guess it takes a very clear-eyed investment strategy in that respect because we know what we need to buy. It needs to be native and digital first, and it needs to work globally. So we have made a series of investments. So we bought a company called Group 9 Media, which is in top 5 sort of digital companies in the States. They have the Dodo, which is the #1 animal site on social. They have Now This, which is the #1 news site on Facebook. And they bring to the company this fantastic ability to create short-form, digital-first content. And, let's be honest, we need to learn how to do that better. So when we are commissioning shows now, we need to think, okay, fine, that's what it will look like linear. That's how we could do it on Snapchat. That's what it will be on Facebook, and so on. So it's a much more complex process. And we have had to buy into some of that talent, we'll be honest. But there's a lot of talent internally as well. So it's a combination of it's organic and it's acquired. We just bought 10 Network, which is the biggest auto network in the States, and within 3 months we've already launched a turbo digital vertical in the UK market on Amazon, so that will be interesting. As you say, here we bought Fetifit, which was a huge privilege for us, and it was a way for us to come and be physically present in this market from 2014. And I think when you buy a brand like that, it's important that you treat it with respect, because it has it's a sort of loved brand and it has a big history in this region. So, it's taught us a lot about how we can develop here.
Okay. And I guess at this point moving forward, if you guys have questions in the audience, do raise your hand. I mean, we're going to continue the conversation, but I want you also to be engaged in this and ask any questions that you might have. I see some interesting faces and lots of people taking pictures and videos. So I'm guessing, there's something interesting to be shared over there. Today, if we look at what one of the biggest struggles that publishers have is the intrusion of social media on their space. In the past, it was you wanted to learn about something, you had to go to either a TV or a new magazine or a newspaper, etc., and get that information from there. But today, most people are on social channels primarily. Even when they're watching TV or they're watching Netflix, they're really on their second screen more often than not. So how do you see these social platforms as part of your strategy, or as how does that integrate with a content producer today? Because today you're saying, I'm not a linear TV, I'm not a channel, I'm a content producer. And how does social play into all of that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we see the social channels as additive to the experience of watching. So again, going back to my comment about the fact that we are serving communities of super fans, we know that we need to enhance the experience of watching with more information, more context, and so on. So if I use the example of Eurosport, so I don't know if this is going to work for you, but it's the one I know, so I'm going to share it with you. But we do a lot with the tennis at Roland Garros. So Eurosport is very known for its coverage of all the tennis Grand Slams. And at Roland Garros, I think probably just because we're based in Paris and it was easier for us, we managed to put cameras at all the different angles on the courts. So we changed our subscription package so that you could specify that you wanted to watch purely the tennis, and then within the tennis you could specify who you wanted to follow, and then you could specify that you would see all the camera angles for their particular match. And whilst you're watching the match, whichever screen you want to watch it on, so let's say you're watching it big screen, sitting on the sofa, big screen in the corner, on your mobile or your tablet, you can get live stream coming in with all the data and the stats and the analysis of what's actually happening in that tennis match. So we see that as a very additive experience. It's a little bit the same with Fetifit, where we now live stream some of our chefs and their demonstrations from our events onto Facebook. We try to use social media as a way to add to the consumer's knowledge, understanding, and experience.
Okay. I guess it also creates a more immersive experience.
Exactly.
If you're going to look at that screen and get more stats, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely engage the people more.
I think that this is about an exchange between us as the content provider and the consumer, and it's got to be a fair exchange. So people have to feel if they're going to give their time to our brands of content, they've got to get something back. Okay. And particularly since we're in that factual entertainment space, I guess, it's got to be, what we give back has got to be additive to their experience. So a lot of what we do with our channels, with Discovery Channel, with Animal Planet, with Investigation Discovery, Discovery Family, Discovery Kids, is in that sort of edutainment space. So we need to be authentic, we need to add value, And we need people to kind of learn from the experience, but not in a way like being at school. That's not what this is about. It's almost like you learn by accident, like osmosis or something, I don't know, some mystery happens. But then the best thing we could say, we know we've done our job when you're in the office the next day and you go to the water cooler and you have like a water cooler conversation. Did you see that on Discovery last night? Did you see the way he did X, Y, Z? That's what we would like to be able to get across. And what screen it's on and whether it's linear or catch-up, we don't really mind.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. So I guess, okay, we can take a question from the audience. If you can just tell me the question, I'll repeat it on the microphone.
That's a really great question.
So let me just repeat that question on the microphone so other people can hear it. The question is, you talked about how social media you use social media to add to the TV or viewing experience, but do you use the vice versa? Do you use social media to kind of create more value for your...
It's such a great question, and thank you, because it raises a whole issue of the fact that this is transactional, as I said, and it's a two-way conversation. It's a two-way creative conversation. So no longer are you just sitting back, passively watching what the schedule tells you you're going to watch at a particular time. I mean, it's so different now. So a couple of examples to give you. We are creating a science app, which I hope we'll be able to launch in this region with a key commercial partner. And one of the things about this science app is that it has an enormous user-generated component. Our concept with Discovery Science is that we are all scientists. So in the app, we're going to encourage people to upload their own science experiments and send them through to us, and then we will create content from that. So that's one example. With Fatafit, there's another example, is, in this region, everyone feels they have a recipe which they're brilliant at.
Mom's recipes.
Yeah, mom's recipe, whatever, and it's better than anybody else's, and you want to have your 15 minutes of fame. So if you can do that through uploading your recipes on our site, and in fact we've just launched a Star Chef competition which does exactly that, but we're only launching it digitally, it's not linear. But we hope that we will find, that it's a two-way conversation now, it really is. So, and it's such a big thing in this region particularly, where everybody is so good at creating content, really quick, easy, uploading it. It's so normal. So we have to react to that and encourage it and learn from it, frankly, as well.
Okay, let's take one more question.
Thank you.
Sorry, how do you feel about new revenue models for new media? Do you think the kind of old digital advertising revenue models will still exist? And how are some of the new media platforms that you're monetizing with native advertising and branded content?
Yes, it's a mix, isn't it? I mean, look, I don't know if we have the answers. I think we need to be very honest that everybody's experimenting. But if you take a brand like Fatafit, just to use a sort of holistic example, so, what is Fatafit known for? It's known for trust, great recipes, great chefs. Okay, so how do you leverage that in this sort of across all the different consumer touch points? So, traditionally it's been about the 30-second television spot. Okay, and it's obviously going forward not going to be like that anymore. But there is a huge component for us, both linear and digital, but increasingly digital, for creating what we call branded content. It's very easy in the food space, obviously, if you're using, the ingredients. So there's that. We've then branched out into e-commerce with an academy, so you can pay us to teach you to cook virtually, not a physical academy. We are moving into events management, so every couple of weeks in a shopping mall somewhere in the region there's a Fatafit chef and an event. At the moment those are unticketed, but over time we'd like to move to a commercial model. There is licensing, so you can buy an apron or whatever, and hopefully over time you would move to more sophisticated devices. So you have to look at where are the consumer touch points and where could you have an authentic transaction. I think key word there is authentic. We charge a premium for that because we don't do too much of it. And I think when you look around at other digital products. Tastemade is a good example in the food space of people that are doing that very well globally. So I think when you look at your revenue streams, I mean, in that digital space, you have the AVOD model, you have an SVOD model. You need a balance, I think. And in this region, you definitely need a balance because you're not going to get it all from one source. But if you're going to do that, you have to make sure that your consumers are not going to be turned off by it. So it's got to be way more sophisticated than pre-roll, mid-roll, all of that stuff. I think there is some research, I can't remember the source, but there's research that people understand in that freemium space. They understand they're going to have to watch some ads if they get the content for free. It's a question of how well you do that commercial messaging. And what we find is that branded content, ad-funded content is much, sponsorships are much more acceptable to a consumer in that transaction than, just straight spots and the boring stuff.
Okay.
Does that answers the question?
Thank you, Amanda.
Pleasure.
I think that's all the time we have. Unfortunately, this is a great conversation. Thank you for a premium interview from a premium brand. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I'm actually just going to MC the next session since I'm moderating it.
Right.
I'll just invite my panelists on stage. It's okay. I'll just introduce them myself since I'm not going to step down off stage and then back on. For the next session, I mean, it's all interesting to see how the brands and publishers are doing with their digital content strategies, but it's also important to look at today social and content as sales channels, and that's increasingly the case today in the Middle East and everywhere else in the world. I'd like to welcome on stage Jad Yamin, the digital manager at Discovery Networks, and Mr. Saeed Ushnak, the e-commerce director at Sayyidati Mall, which are part of Sayyidati Magazine and Assets, to discuss really the social and commerce side of publishing and content production. So if you